My wife humiliated me in front of our son's entire school, but when I finally stood up to her, she dropped a bombshell that could end our marriage. Today, my 32-main son's 5-mate kindergarten had a little play. It was a short story involving a bunch of bunnies, giraffes, and sheep. My son, Kevin, was one of the giraffes. I was looking forward to it all week, but I was also anxious because my wife, Claire, 31F, tends to get very bad when we're in front of other people. She'll often become aggressive, short-tempered, and will be incredibly rude towards me. I think she does it performatively because she thinks it makes her look cool. Anyway, Claire and I arrived early to get front-row seats in their small auditorium. First, as we waited, Claire began by putting her bag and other belongings on the 2 seats next to her. I had to get her to put them under her chair because other people might want to sit there. She accosted me because, "Of course I know that. I was going to move them when it got crowded." Then she began setting up a camera on a tripod on top of the seat, which would have obstructed the view of anyone else behind us. Luckily, one of the teachers there asked her nicely to take it down. Unfortunately, this put Claire in a foul mood, and I knew she would be taking it out on me eventually. The performance started, and our son did a great job. But he had a little giraffe hat on with a cord to go under his chin, and he put the cord in his mouth during the play. Claire would simply not shut up about this. As all the parents took videos, she was constantly saying things like, "I told him not to chew on it," and "Kevin, take the cord out of your mouth." I could tell other parents were getting irritated with her because her voice was getting on their video of their children. I lightly suggested in a whisper, "Hey, other people are taking videos. I don't think Kevin can hear you anyway." Claire did not take this well. She began loudly ranting to herself. She would repeat things like, "God, I want him to shut the fuck up," and mock my voice with "Kevin can't hear you." Over time, she gradually got louder and louder. Finally, when I was pretty sure Kevin's part in the play was done, I stood up and walked out. I waited in the car. Claire and Kevin came out about 20 minutes later. She opened the door and immediately began tearing into her about abandoning her and Kevin. When I responded that she was embarrassing me, she began sulking and ranting about how she's such an embarrassment to her family. I don't know what I could have done better. Should I have handled this differently? Update 1. So first of all, I didn't expect this much of a response to my post. I've spent the last few days going through every single comment and message, and I want to thank everyone for the advice, the critiques, and even the tough love. Some of it was hard to read, but I think I needed that push to really reflect on what's going on in my life. A few people asked for more context about Claire's behavior, whether this is a one-time thing or if this happens often, so I thought I'd clarify a few things here and give an update on the situation since that day at the kindergarten play. To start with, this isn't new behavior from Claire. I didn't include all the details in my original post because, to be honest, I didn't want to paint her in too bad of a light. We've been together for nearly 8 years, married for 6, and looking back now, there were definitely signs of her temper early on. But I always brushed it off, thinking it was stress from work or just her personality. She's always been headstrong, opinionated, and quick to voice her frustrations. But over the years, it's escalated into her lashing out in public, especially at me. What happened at Kevin's play is just one example, but I guess it's the one that really made me question how I've been handling things all this time. Claire has a history of getting angry in social situations, especially when she feels judged or out of control. For instance, if we go out to dinner and something about the service isn't right, she'll immediately get on edge, making passive-aggressive comments or outright snapping at the waitstaff. I've always been the one to step in and smooth things over, apologizing for her or trying to change the subject. It's exhausting. And when I say she lashes out at me, it's not usually in private. It's always in front of people, like she's performing for an audience. That's what makes it worse. It feels like she's trying to humiliate me, but when I bring it up, she'll either brush it off or accuse me of being overly sensitive. After the play, things at home were tense, as you can imagine. The car ride was silent, except for Kevin asking a few innocent questions about why we left early. I didn't want to argue in front of him, so I just stayed quiet. Claire was fuming, but also clearly trying to hold it in. I could feel her anger radiating off her, though, like she was waiting for the moment we were alone to unleash it. Sure enough, when we got home and Kevin was in bed, she started. She said I embarrassed her by walking out, that I made her look like a fool in front of the other parents. This really hit me, because I thought she was the one embarrassing me. But I kept calm. I told her that I walked out because she was being loud and disruptive, and I didn't want to cause a scene in front of Kevin or the other parents. I explained that I felt uncomfortable and that her behavior wasn't okay. And here's the part that surprised me. She actually stopped. For a second, she looked taken aback, like she wasn't expecting me to confront her about it. But then she went back to her usual defensiveness. She started saying things like, "Oh, so I'm the bad guy, and I'm just a terrible wife and mother, is that it?" It was like she was trying to turn herself into the victim. This is something she does often, and I'm realizing now how manipulative it is. She'll act out, then when I call her on it, she flips the script so that I end up comforting her or apologizing. And I almost fell for it again. But this time I stood my ground. I told her that her behavior, especially in public, has been getting worse, and that it's affecting not just me, but also Kevin. I reminded her how uncomfortable he seemed during the play when she kept yelling at him about the giraffe cord. I told her we need to figure something out because I can't keep living like this. That's when she broke down crying. And I mean, really crying. Not the dramatic, performative kind she usually does when she's trying to manipulate the situation. She was sobbing, saying she knows she has issues, that she feels out of control sometimes, and that she doesn't know how to stop herself from getting angry. This was the first time she's ever admitted that something might be wrong. It hit me hard. I've never seen her this vulnerable before, and it made me realize that there's more going on here than just her being a difficult person. She genuinely seems to be struggling with something, maybe anxiety or some kind of deeper issue. We talked for a long time after that. I told her that I love her, but I can't keep being the target of her frustration. I told her that I'm willing to support her, but only if she's willing to get help. I suggested we look into therapy, both individual for her and couples therapy for us. She didn't say much after that, just nodded, and we both went to bed exhausted. The next day, she seemed more subdued, like the fight had taken something out of her. She agreed to look into therapy, though she seemed hesitant. I don't know if she'll actually follow through, but it's a start. I've been thinking a lot about Kevin through all of this. He's only 5, but I worry about how Claire's behavior is affecting him. He's a sensitive kid, and I've noticed that he gets really quiet when Claire and I argue. He tries to distract himself with toys or TV, but I can see him glancing over, watching us with these big, sad eyes. It kills me to think that he's absorbing all of this, that he might start thinking this kind of behavior is normal. That's what's driving me to make a change, not just for my sake, but for his. I don't want him growing up in a house where he feels like he has to walk on eggshells around his mom, or worse, that he starts mimicking her anger. So, where do we stand now? Claire is supposed to call a therapist this week. I've been looking into some couples therapists in our area, but I'm trying not to push too hard. I don't want to overwhelm her, especially since this is already a big step for her. But at the same time, I'm prepared to set boundaries. I've been thinking a lot about what you guys said about enabling her behavior by not standing up for myself sooner. I've realized that by trying to keep the peace, I've let things get to this point. I'm not saying it's my fault, but I can see how I've contributed by not addressing it sooner. I'm cautiously optimistic, but also realistic. I know therapy isn't a quick fix, and there's a chance things won't improve. But at least I've finally acknowledged that there's a problem, and so has Claire, which feels like the first step in the right direction. I'll update again once we've started therapy or if anything major happens. I really hope this is the turning point for us, but I guess only time will tell. Thanks again to everyone who commented. You've given me a lot to think about, and I'm feeling more hopeful than I have in a long time. Update 2. So, a lot has happened since my last update, and I've been really trying to process everything before coming back here. I want to thank everyone again for the advice and support. Some of it really opened my eyes, and I've realized just how deep this issue runs in my relationship with Claire. I'll try to lay out what's been going on and how things have progressed since my last post, because there's been a lot of movement, both good and bad. After my last update, Claire agreed to look into therapy, and for a moment, I thought things might actually be moving in the right direction. We even had a brief period where everything felt calm, almost like how it was when we first started dating. She seemed more subdued, like she was trying harder to control her temper, especially around Kevin. I don't know if it was because she was really reflecting on what I'd said, or if she just didn't want another argument, but for a week or two, things felt more manageable. But here's where things get complicated. Claire finally made the call to a therapist, but it was almost like a switch flipped the moment she did. She came out of the room after the phone call, and I could just tell something was off. She looked irritated, closed off, and immediately started nitpicking little things around the house. Why is this dish still in the sink? Why didn't you fold the laundry properly? And before I knew it, we were back to square one. It was like she was trying to create tension, maybe because going to therapy had triggered some sort of defensive reaction in her. The next day, we had our first argument since the kindergarten play incident. It started over something small, as usual. Kevin had spilled juice on the carpet, and Claire snapped at him pretty harshly, which made him start crying. I stepped in and told her she was overreacting, that it was just juice and we could clean it up. She turned to me with this icy look and said, "You always have to undermine me, don't you? Always swooping in to play the hero." I tried to stay calm and told her I wasn't undermining her. I was just trying to help Kevin feel better. But she kept escalating, saying I never support her and that I always make her look like the bad guy. That's when things took a turn I wasn't expecting. Claire stormed out of the room and locked herself in the bedroom for the rest of the afternoon. Kevin was confused and upset, so I spent the next few hours trying to keep him distracted. When Claire finally came out, she was eerily calm, but not in a good way. She sat me down and said she needed to talk. She told me she's been feeling trapped in our marriage for a while now, that she feels like she's lost herself, and that maybe therapy isn't going to help. She said something that really hit me hard. "I think I'm just not happy anymore, and I don't know if I can be." I didn't know what to say at first. Hearing her say she's not happy felt like a punch in the gut. I've known things have been bad, but I didn't realize she'd gotten to the point where she's questioning whether she can even be happy with me. It made me start questioning everything. Have I been so focused on her behavior that I didn't notice her slipping into this? Is there more going on that I haven't seen? But then I reminded myself of something a lot of you said. I can't keep blaming myself for her actions. Yes, we both have our issues, but I can't fix what's broken in her. So I asked her point blank, "What do you want to do about this? Do you want to work on things, or are you saying you want out?" And that's when she dropped the second bombshell. She's not sure. She said she doesn't know if she wants to stay in the marriage or not, but she's willing to go to therapy to figure it out. That should have been a relief, but instead, it left me feeling even more uncertain. It felt like she was putting our entire marriage on trial, and that's terrifying. I've been walking around on eggshells ever since, trying not to upset her or push her away, but at the same time, I'm starting to realize how much of myself I've lost in all of this. We started therapy last week, and to be honest, it was a rough first session. The therapist asked us to describe the issues in our relationship, and Claire jumped in immediately, saying she feels like I'm too passive and that I don't stand up for her enough. I sat there, feeling like I was in the twilight zone, because all I could think about was how many times I've tried to de-escalate situations where she was the one overreacting or being aggressive. But I let her speak, because I didn't want to turn it into a fight in front of the therapist. When it was my turn, I tried to explain how her behavior has been affecting me and how I've felt increasingly disrespected, especially in public. I mentioned the kindergarten play as one example, and that's when Claire lost it. She started getting defensive, saying I was exaggerating the whole situation and that she wasn't being that loud. The therapist had to step in and ask her to take a breath, which only seemed to make Claire more frustrated. By the end of the session, I felt like we hadn't really made any progress. Claire was visibly irritated, and I could tell she didn't like hearing some of the things I said, but at least we were talking about it, I guess. The therapist suggested we both work on communicating more calmly and try to understand each other's perspectives. Easier said than done, right? Since then, things have been up and down. Claire agreed to continue therapy, but I can tell she's not fully invested. She's still quick to snap at me, and I've noticed she's been spending more time by herself, either going out with friends or just locking herself in the bedroom with her phone. I'm trying not to read too much into it, but part of me wonders if she's already checked out of the marriage and is just going through the motions. Kevin, meanwhile, is picking up on everything. He started asking more questions, like why Mommy and Daddy aren't spending as much time together, or why Mommy seems upset a lot. It breaks my heart, because I can see the confusion in his eyes. I've been trying to shield him from as much of this as I can, but it's impossible to hide everything. Kids are more perceptive than we give them credit for, and I don't want him growing up thinking that this kind of relationship is normal. I'm stuck in this limbo right now. I don't know if Claire is going to commit to working on our marriage or if she's going to decide she's done. And honestly, I don't know how much longer I can keep living like this. Therapy is supposed to help us, but I feel like it's only brought up more uncertainty. Every day feels like I'm walking on thin ice, not knowing if it's going to crack beneath me. For now, I'm trying to focus on Kevin and making sure he feels loved and supported, no matter what happens between Claire and me. I'm also working on standing up for myself more, even if it means risking more conflict with Claire. I can't keep letting her walk all over me just to avoid a fight. That's no way to live, and it's not what I want to model for Kevin. I'll keep you all updated as things progress, but right now, it's just a waiting game. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I'm bracing myself for whatever comes next. Thanks again for all the advice and support. You've helped me see things more clearly even if the path ahead is still uncertain.